Good morning and welcome back. Sorry that we had a bit of a technical connectivity issue there with Mr. Walker and his audio, but we are back now. Good morning, Mr. Walker, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning to you. I hope you're hearing me clearly now, and good morning to all your listeners and viewers.
I can again, and thank you for being here this morning. So, we're talking a bit about the status of the Studley Park Enterprise Limited and its progress or regression since you have been the chairman. Now, there have been a lot of discussions in the space regarding the productivity of the plants and its ability to supply the demand. So give us a bit of background information on where you think the plant is now compared to when you were there as the executive chairman.
Right. I have to preface what I say by realization that I have not been on the premises for about a year. I occasionally get people calling me, wanting to share information, but I prefer to look at it from a fairly simple perspective. And that is that at the time of my departure, we were producing material not just for the trucks, the truckers, and the local Tobago enterprises, but also for Trinidad. What we were struggling to do is to increase production to the point where we covered what was required for Tobago and Trinidad and have enough left over to supply the lucrative Guyanese market. It is unquestionable, therefore, that finding ourselves in a situation 1 year later when we can't even supply the truckers in Tobago, that we have regressed dramatically. And, I keep reminding people that that comes at a huge cost to us here in Tobago. What I mean by that is that by this time, 1 year on, we had projected to be producing over 100,000 tons of aggregate per month, most of which was going to Guyana, sold at a minimum price of $20 a ton. So we expected well before now to be generating a minimum of 2 million US dollars per month from the quarry. While we find ourselves in this situation, that is money we literally throwing away. We need to fix whatever is the problem at the quarry. Now, my brief explanation would be that the problems that were encountered because of the age of the plant and the lack of proper maintenance over several years, that I and most of my board came to the conclusion that that plant could not service our requirements, and we therefore had plans in place to partly replace and partly upgrade that plant well ahead of where we are now. So I really don't understand what the problem is because the problems had been identified. So it's not as if the new chairman shouldn't have known what the problems were and found a way to address them within the 12 months that have gone.
Okay, and the former chairman indicated that when they got there, there was no operational manual indicating to them how to manage or to run the plant. Can you speak to that?
I can't speak directly to that, but I am satisfied that there is technical expertise sufficient to run the plant properly, and that in the event, in the rare instances where there was something that was above the head of the in house people, there is expertise that could be brought in externally, sometimes from Trinidad and Tobago, sometimes internationally.
Had you guys earmarked a plant that you wanted to buy from any particular place in the world? Because during my conversation, I remember the chairman said that they went to Ghana and looked at some plants that were there and looking at the affordability of getting a Chinese plant. Had you guys identified any particular plants?
The only plant we had identified specifically in any amount of detail was a used plant in Trinidad that we were interested in and had actually approved on a very risk careful basis. That is to say, we paid a relatively small amount up front, and the remainder of the payment would be totally dependent on the ability of the plant to deliver. And we felt confident that with that kind of arrangement, we would get the maximum support from the vendor, and that we would have been operational within about 3 months of my departure. Other than that, we had spoken to a number of other people who were interested in bringing plant in and suggested to us that plant could be acquired within a period of 3 to 6 months, providing we could generate the capital required to bring it in.
And given that you touched a bit on the aging infrastructure of the plants up there at Studley Park, I remember the former chief secretary saying that before he demitted office, that they had done over one of the plants. Do you think that that was sufficient enough to increase the level of productivity that is needed for the Studley Park quarries?
Well, I don't know what extent of repairs were done. I know that when I arrived, we were able to produce to a sufficient level that allows us to produce aggregate for all those roads that were rapidly built. So we were producing. And my expectation was as the demand for the Tobago roads receded, we would then have surplus that we could sell elsewhere. So it wasn't as if we were in a situation where we were not producing. We were producing. So I really struggled to understand the depth of the problems that we found ourselves in.
Understood. We're going to take a quick break right here, and we're going to be back right after this break as we continue our conversation on the Studley Park Quarry Limited. Good morning and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago. We have been chatting with the former executive chairman of the Studley Park Enterprise Limited, Mr. David Walker. Good morning and welcome back, Mr. Walker. We have been talking about the status of the Studley Park Enterprise Limited while he was the chairman, and some of the progression that we've seen now, or in the eyes of some people, regression. Talk to us about what some of the stakeholders are currently saying in this space in regards to the ability of the quarry to deliver, because you said people often call you and give you updates even though you're no longer there. What are some of the conversations that are happening in the space surrounding the quarries at the moment?
Okay, I will delve into that, but forgive me if I go back to something I feel that is very, very important, which we haven't touched on as yet. And it is that because of the manner of my removal from the position, we neglected to do one of the most fundamental things in management where management changed. There was no handover.
Mm.
It took me 4 months before I felt I had gotten a grasp of all the complexities of not just running the place, but all the other issues about sales, logistics, etc. In the way that we did what we did, not just with me, but most of the rest of the board, we literally threw all that learning out of the window and they started again. So I would imagine that that is one of the obstacles that caused us to be in the situation that we are in now. It would have assisted greatly because we had a whole raft of plans. We had risk analyses. We did all the things that a competent management team would be expected to do, and that was just cast aside at the handover, such as it was. So I would introduce that as one of the key elements of why we went backwards instead of building upon what we had put in place. And that covered all sorts of things, inclusive of even our approach to freedom of information requests. You name it, it was covered. And it was just dismissed out of hand.
Understood. And in regards to what you have been hearing in regards to some of the stakeholders about the plant.
Well, I made it a point not to actively seek to inquire about what was going on. I really, quite frankly, washed my hands. Despite that, I receive calls from time to time. I would run into one or two of the employees, even not just in Tobago, but in Trinidad, and they would always wish to have a conversation with me. There is a lot of discontent. Um, I wasn't aware, but I was told that there were dismissals, and that staff felt that their views weren't being taken into account. And these would have been staff members who had been around for a long time and who had been a key part of what we were trying to do. So you also then had the situation with a demotivated group of people being asked to do things um, at a level in order to cope with a demand that they had never seen before. Because again, I got the impression that many of the decision makers did not understand that dealing with demand of 20,000 tons per month, which is the sort of volume that had been done down the years, and moving into the 100,000 plus tons a month is not just a question of numbers. There are all kinds of things that come into play. And staff have to be a critical part of that. And the message I was getting is that the staff, their expertise wasn't valued, and certainly they weren't being rewarded. And with respect to staff being rewarded, I will introduce something that I haven't spoken about publicly before. The rest of the board is aware of it because it was a board discussion and decision. Given the plans that we had for the increased production, we had a target at which we would have automatically increased staff salaries by a fixed percent across the board. This was in recognition of the reality that the staff who work there have not seen an increase in more than 5 years. And we felt that we needed to do something about it. We did not have the time, we felt, in order to do the proper evaluation. That would come later. So we were going to do a blanket across the board increase once we hit a certain target. It wasn't discussed with staff because it was something that we wanted to give them as a reward for the amount of work that we knew they would have to do if we were going to achieve the targets that we spoke about. Other than that, when I speak with any of the previous member of staff, it's very cordial and mostly friendly and discussing issues other than the work situation.
Okay, well, it seems that yourself and the current chairman are on the same page in regards to increasing the type of compensation for the workers at the quarry, because he also indicated that based on the circumstances there, that there should be an increase in the rates for the workers. And as we wrap up our conversation this morning, do you have any words of advice for the current board?
I would be reticent about giving any advice to the current board. They know what their plans are. I don't know what are the foundational elements of their plan. So that I feel if I give advice, it's based on the ideas and the projections that my team and I had done. So I wouldn't be keen to do that, with one exception. Sudley Park Quarry, to be successful, has to collaborate with a number of other agencies. It has to do that in order to get its blasting permit, its export license, and a number of other things. The one lesson we've learned and which we should work upon is that we need to collaborate rather than stand there and shout at people, arguing that they want to hold us back through spite. That will get us nowhere. In fact, that probably has gotten us to where we are now. We need to take a different approach. We need to work together with people. In business, I've said it so many times. In business, you often have to work with people that you do not like and who may not like you. But in the interest of your organization and that person's organization, you have to find common ground. You have to find a way to work together. And that would be my most important lesson that I would share with the current management and directorship.
Thank you so much. We want to thank you for giving us your time this morning and being with us here on Good Morning Tobago. Thank you so much, Mr. Walker. Guys, we're going to take a
Oh,
quick break right here and we'll be back right after this break.